Good morning and welcome to Mercedes World. This is the first of our rollout of roadshows.
That's going to fall over, isn't it?
And we're going to present to you today, and hopefully it'll be an interactive session. BS 7671, what I would normally call the IET regulations amendment to 18th edition. So we'll start with some housekeeping. There are no planned fire tests today, so if the fire alarm goes off or if there's another emergency, alarms go off, then please look at the exits, and follow any instructions that you get from Mercedes World staff, please. Thank you. Phones, please keep them on, but just turn down the sound, please, because you're going to need them. In terms of breaks, we're going to have one break now, while the battery goes on that. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Can we get another battery? Or that was a good start, wasn't it? So we're going to have a break about halfway through, probably about 10:30. If all works well and we don't have any more hiccups already. Hopefully you've all seen the stands and exhibitors upstairs. There's some great things to look at. So when we have that break, it's not just a comfort break, please go up and see all the sponsors and exhibitions that you can upstairs. In terms of social media, if you want to follow on social media, we have a hashtag Project18 for those that are media savvy. COVID. We've done our best to make this facility COVID friendly. We have a number of UVC disinfection units in the room. They've been on for quite some time this morning. However, if you feel that you've got symptoms of COVID, not quite sure, then I would please ask you just to quietly leave, go home. It's safer for all of us. If, however, you do want to sit there and wear a mask, please do. Please don't feel awkward. You're more than welcome to sit in a mask. QR codes. Hopefully you've seen both on your invitation and externally around the building there are some QR codes. There's one particular QR code which is for the Eventee app. If you've downloaded that app, that will allow you to answer and ask questions during the sessions. Okay? CPD accredited. We have, this whole session is CPD accredited, and you will be able to provide us with some feedback at the end and also download a 3-hour certificate of CPD. Okay, so the agenda. Obviously, this is the introduction. History and implementation. What I wanted to do is just give you a feel. Sometimes I've been on the other side, and I know it feels like every few years somebody just wants to sell you another book. I understand, but just to set the scene in terms of how we link in European and worldwide standards wise, we'll just touch on that a little bit, just to give you a flavour of how these things come together. Then we'll take you through in the detail of parts 1 to 4. And following a presentation from ECA, we'll have that break that I just spoke about. So please use that break wisely and get around to see everybody. After that, we'll go through parts 5 to 7. Then we'll follow that with a presentation from Signify. If you don't know who Signify are, think Philips Lighting. And then we'll introduce you to a new part of the regs, totally new part, part 8. And then we'll mop up with going through the appendices, and we'll take you through some general topics that will finish the day off. So hopefully it'll be... Oh, no. It does. Okay, speakers for today are myself, Gary Parker, who has done plenty of presentations before. I did Project 18. Shahid's a fairly new member, Luke and Darren. And we'll have the guest speakers from ECA and Signify. Okay, so the purpose of the day, very obvious it is what it says on the book. We won't be able to cover every single change in that amendment. There are some minor changes throughout, but we will cover all the major changes that you need to know. Okay, if you haven't downloaded, that's the Eventi app. You could do it now if you haven't already done it. So I'll give you a minute if you want to do that. It just allows you to ask questions without me coming around and sticking a microphone under your nose, if I had a microphone, that is. Look at all these tech-savvy guys. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you. That just saves my throat. Okay. Are we all done with that? Brilliant. Okay. Okay, for those that have got the app, I just want to test the technology, seeing as we've had something go wrong already. So, you saw a picture of the new book. There's a test question on the Eventi app, if you can access it. Do you like the colour of the new book? And I'll introduce you to a little gimmick my friends from Tech have put together. This will time through. This is an introduction to Terry the Technical Tit. That's Terry. Okay, and how are we doing?
60% of people in favour and 40% not. And thanks to all 8 of you.
Hey!
So we like better interaction with the next question, but we're probably just navigating it.
Hey, don't knock it. That means we're going to finish and get on the road nice and early tonight. That's great. Okay. Okay, so that's my brief introduction. I'll wrap up the end of the session just with those general topics, but we'll get right into the meat of things now. And so I'll ask Gary to come onto the stage and start us off. Gary.
Thank you. Right, see if this mic's working. No. Is this one working? Hello. I might need that one. Anybody technical round here? One of these mics work? Thank you. Is that one working? There we go. Thank you. Morning, everyone. You all right? Yeah. Thanks for coming. Hopefully we'll have a good day for you. Did anybody, just as a show of hands, come here the last time for the 18th Roadshow? Yeah, fair few? Okay. So we're going to have a same sort of event today. We'll go through some of the elements that are hopefully going to be affecting you guys. But we've got, as Mike said, a few other people here. We'll all be hanging around at the breaks. We'll all be hanging around afterwards. So if you do want to have a chat, come on up and we'll happily have a chat with you after the event. So we'll go through a little bit of history. I think we did this last time, so if you recognise it, feel free to nod off. But it gives a bit of an example as to why we're doing some things. So way back in 1882, which rumour has it was the last time that jacket was fashionable. He wasn't listening. The wiring regs was only 4 pages long. 4 pages. Didn't say an awful lot, obviously. It did say, don't blow anybody up, don't kill anybody, don't kill any animals, which is sort of good practice now. And it was wrote by a small group of people in a room in London. Well, it's got a bit bigger since then. It's over 600 pages now. And it's not wrote by a small group of people. It's wrote by a large group of people, not only in this country, but throughout the rest of the world. The IEC, the International Electrotechnical Commission, and CENELEC, the European Technical Commission, they are the people who influence our standards, probably more so than what we in this country do. And most of the changes we're talking about today will have come from an IEC or a CENELEC change. So it's a constant wheel of changing. It's why we have amendments every 3-4 years coming out. This is an amendment. It's not a new edition. It's still the 18th edition, but it's just the second amendment. And whenever we get all these constant changes from IEC and CENELEC, you end up getting a new book, which is why you've got a new book. A lot of people think that it's a cynical event to make money. It isn't. It really isn't, because all British standards go through this. It's just, in this case, we end up getting a new book. We are quite lucky, weirdly, in this country, because a lot of other European and international countries buy sections. We get all the bits in the book. A lot of the other parts have to buy individual bits, and it really does adds up to a lot. So here, we try and keep it as one book, which is quite handy. The reason that we change these standards and these new things develop is partly safety, partly new thinking, and partly new inventions. If you think in 1882, RCDs didn't exist. Circuit breakers didn't exist. Everything changes and everything develops. And new thought and new ideas, new technology, and we'll cover off some of the new ideas that come up later on today, end up making the book a little bit bigger. That's why it's now 600 odd pages as opposed to being just the 4. But the core principles are still the same. Don't blow anybody up, don't kill anybody, don't kill any animals. That's what we're trying to achieve. And when these changes happen through the international and the European stuff, it ends up filtering down to each country, and they make their own little tweaks and amendments, and eventually we get into this. Just out of interest, did any of you guys see the draft for public comment? Was it 18 months ago, 2 years ago? Yeah? Did any of you comment on it? Yeah? If you do, next time around, see the DPC, comment on it, because your input is absolutely vital. The reason some of the changes in the draft didn't happen was because of what you guys put in and said, we don't like that, or we do like that. Do make sure you get to comment on it, because it's your chance to vote effectively. So we've got our new book. It's a nice colour of brown for some reason. It's still the same setup. It's still divided up into its parts and its sections and its chapters. But we do have a new part this time, part 8, brand spanking new bit, which Luke's going to cover off later in great detail for us. We've got a few new definitions and we've got a few safety changes. And that's the whole input of it, really. So we'll go through this and we'll cover off Amendment 2. Now, you might be thinking, where's Amendment 1? What's happened to that? Well, it came out a few years back, and it was just a free download, just related to electric vehicles. So it was free to download, you had to pay to print it off. Now, that is included in the Brown Book. So when you get the Brown Book, Amendment 1 is already included. If you guys didn't see, by the way, at the intro, there was a rolling slide with a discount code if you buy your books from NIC. You see that? So if you haven't got a book yet, get a look at the discount code, speak to the guy at NIC upstairs, and you get a discount off it, so you get it nice and cheap. We don't have any on the day. It's 4 days, I think, you can use to put that code in, and then you can get it delivered to you. So if you want it, make a note of the code, speak to the guy upstairs, and then you'll get a reduced price book. So we'll have a little look at what's in Part 1 now. Part 1 is the fundamental principles, the framework, the skeleton for the standard. And the first thing to look at is when the new book comes into effect. So it was launched yesterday, came out yesterday. So you can get a copy of it now. But there is a 6-month or so interval period up until the 27th of September where you can work with one book or the other book. What you can't do is cherry pick a bit of both. So you're either designing to the 18th edition or you're designing to the 18th edition Amendment 2, not both. So you've got a 6-month period where you can decide which one you're working to. After the 27th of September, anything must be done to the 18th Amendment 2. There's been a good little clarification put in here. When we were here last time, 4 years ago, they were talking about AFDDs and how they were recommended in certain places. And a lot of contractors said, right, if it's recommended, it means I have to do it. Or a lot of consultants also said that as well. That is not the case. They've actually defined what is a recommendation. So where you see the words shall, that means you must. Where you see recommendation, it says it's an expression in the content of the document conveying, among several possibilities, one is recommended as being particularly suitable. Doesn't mean you must. So wherever you see recommended in the book, it is just a suggestion. Don't feel you have to. Okay? Shalls, you are. You doing them. Recommended is just giving you some information, which I think is quite a good thing. This hasn't changed this bit, but I've put it on because we think it's quite important. There's a reg at the beginning, 114.1, that says where you've got a supply given to you in accordance with the ESQCR, the Electrical Safety, Quality and Continuity regs. If you've got a neutral and earth connection, a PME connection, you shall assume it's sound. Now, there's a lot of talk and rumours about PME and broken neutrals. Have you guys come across this? You've heard about this? Yeah? It does happen. Without a shadow of a doubt, it does happen. But there is a reg at the start that emphasises if you've got a neutral earth connection, it shall be good. And that's a legal requirement on the distributors to have that. Now, it's worth just highlighting that because there is a lot of information going around saying PME, you should assume it's not there. You should also put these measures in and worry about things. That reg has been there for a while, and it's still there now. So just wanted to highlight that. Now, did you manage to get that Eventi thing downloaded? We've got another question coming up now. No internet? We'll see. When we get outside, we'll get you some Wi-Fi. That'll be handy for this one. Right, for those 13 people who did get it, just out of interest, have any of you guys had a broken pen or come across a broken pen? What was it, Terence? There he is. There he is. That's 20-second timer. That just lets us know that we aren't standing here for too long or too short. So if you have a look on the Eventi app, if you've got it up and running, have you experienced a broken pen? 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so far the 12 people that have voted.
Yes.
15 now, 15, so it's pretty much an even split, 53.
Okay, so a few of you guys have come across broken pens. So it is something that does happen. It's worth bearing it in mind. That reg still says it should be there and it should be solid and it should be sound. Part 2, few definitions. Part 2 is where you go to find out information about what something means. And there's a load of definitions that have changed, been added to, and because of the new Part 8, new ones that have been put in there. These are just some of them. And we've highlighted a couple here for you. Protected escape route. We'll cover that off in a bit more detail. That's a new phrase that's been put in. Do you remember a few years ago, was it the 17th, people were talking about escape routes, and if you go to a certain event, somebody was saying, well, anything could be an escape route, and therefore you've got to make everything like this. They've defined what's a protected escape route, and Shahid's going to cover that off later on for us. Foundation earthing. Again, in the DPC, we had options of maybe using foundation earthing for a building, or in some cases insisting. It's clarified what foundation earthing is. DSO, distribution system operator, very much like a DNO, but it's a slightly more modern version. So you'll start hearing people referring to DSOs. It means that the distribution network operator or the distribution system operator, it just allows them to be a bit cleverer, a bit smarter, and have two-way systems. So you can have solar systems feeding back into the grid. And we've probably all seen this one at some point, ZDB. We've probably all done it. It's a distribution board Z test. It's an impedance test at a board. But they've put a definition in and explained what it is, and then it comes on to some paperwork later on. There's a load of other definitions. Have a look when you get a chance. See which ones affect you. Some of them will, some of them won't. All right, part 3. This is a lovely slide, this one. I like this one. This is now on it. No changes, really. A few little tweaks, a few little alterations, but nothing that really affects what you guys do. What does affect what you guys do is what's coming up next, which is part 4, and the lovely Shahid. Hello, sir.
Thank you.
Hey!
Very much. Cheers, guys.
Where was my clap?
I feel like I'm at a darts show.
Oh, you want this? Hang on.
I need that, don't I?
Yeah, you do need that.
Thank you.
Down one.
Yep, brilliant. Thank
See
you
ya.
very much. Okay, so welcome to the ECA's presentation. I am a bit nervous, but hopefully it should be all right. Part 4, protection for safety. So this is where most of the sort of major changes have happened. Okay, major. Okay, so we're starting off with one of the old favourites, really, 411.312, which is to do with bonding. Now, the good thing here is the technical intent hasn't changed. It's just the wording, okay? So they've tried to clarify things for us. In terms of what it says, it basically, it's exactly the same in terms of the technical intent. It's just ensuring that the extraneous conductive parts are bonded. So we've got to think about extraneous conductive parts. We've got to think about things that are metallic, that lead outside and into the ground. They potentially need to be bonded, okay? There was a little bit of clarification in terms of telecoms cables. They also have always needed to be bonded. However, you needed the permission of the owner of that service, which was pretty much impossible to get, okay? So if you haven't bonded it, now you need to record it as a departure, okay, on your paperwork, okay? So they're the major things with 411.312. 411.3.3, so that's talking about additional protection on socket outlets, okay? So this reg, it always gets reworded. It's very difficult in terms of still trying to keep that risk assessment, but we've managed to keep it, okay? So the risk assessment element still exists. However, the wording is totally different. So it basically says RCDs must be provided. So the word shall, if you remember from what Gary said, means must. It's normative. We have to do it. Must be provided for socket outlets not exceeding 32 amps, okay? And that's where they are used or potentially used by ordinary persons, children or disabled. And they've used Appendix 5 in terms of the BA1, BA2 and BA3 categories to try and quantify what those elements are. So again, if you think about like BA1, we're talking domestic more than anything else, ordinary persons. BA2, potentially schools, yeah? Okay, and then obviously BA3 could be like care homes and things like that. In all other cases, they are also mandated, and they are also mandated on socket circuits used outdoors. However, the risk assessment still does exist, but only for item number 2, for all other locations, okay? So you can use that, okay? There was also an additional note that says that an ordinary person doesn't become an instructed person electrically just by somebody giving them a direction. Okay, we can't use that as a reason for negating RCD protection. Okay, just because you've said don't use these sockets doesn't necessarily make that person an instructed person electrically. Okay, so we shouldn't be doing that. So that's a slide just talking about the Appendix 5 and the BA1, BA2, BA3s. So if you wanted more information on that, open up your cappuccino coloured book and go to Appendix 5 and have a look. What we've also done, because risk assessments are always awkward to do, we have created a guide for members that talks you through the process of how to do that, and that's available on our website. Okay? Okay, so we've got a question. I'm naming the birdie Trevor as opposed to Terry. Okay, so if you look out for Trevor the tit, and if we can answer this question. So it's, does your business ever use the option to omit RCDs for socket outlets? Okay, so I'll set the timer. Here he comes. Yep.
Okay, right, we have no for 67% and
Okay.
yes for 33.
Okay, oh, that's good, that's good. Darren, your handout is probably going to be useful to 33% of members. Okay, so we've moved away from RCDs. We're now talking about regulation 411.4.2, which is automatic disconnection and earthing in TN systems. And what this regulation says is that it's a recommendation to also drop in an earth electrode, okay? Again, it's a recommendation only. So again, just remember what Gary said. Okay, we don't have to do it, okay? But it's an option. It's an option that's been agreed upon. So that's something to think about. But it's nowhere near where we were in terms of the DPC and foundation earthing, okay? And also remember regulation 114.1, which says that the connection between supply neutral and earth is to be deemed a permanent connection. Okay, so the suppliers have an obligation there, it's a legal obligation to maintain any pens. Okay, so we've now moved away from chapter 41, which was protection against electric shock, and we're now talking about protection against thermal effects, fires, basically. 421.1.7, which is the dreaded AFDD one. Sorry, I didn't say dreaded, promise. Basically, what we've got is an increased use of AFDDs. Now, there were a lot of comments in the DPC against that. However, it's sort of natural progression in terms of the regulations. Again, from what Gary said earlier on, it comes from the European standards. So because they're in our, what they call the HD document, the harmonised document, we have to adopt the technical intent of them. We kicked them back once, but they've filtered through this time. Okay. Hopefully what you'll find is that the regulations are a bit clearer. So adopting the regulations from a practical perspective might be a bit easier, actually. Okay, so what does it say? AFDDs are now required, so it's a shall, for single-phase AC circuits, AC final circuits, supplying socket outlets rated up to 32 amps. So they've copied the wording almost from the RCD regulation. It's quite similar, isn't it? Okay, but it's only for socket outlets up to 32 amps, and it's only in 4 locations. We've got something called a HRRB, a higher risk residential building. I'll come back to that one. We've also got HMOs, houses in multiple occupation. We've got purpose-built student accommodation. So the key words there are purpose-built. Okay, so we're not talking about domestic properties that you're renting out, you know, to students. And care homes. Okay, so if we go back to this higher risk thing, okay, unfortunately, it's got nothing. The definition's got nothing to do with the residential element, which is a bit weird. It's a height thing, okay? So it's either buildings that are above 18 metres or 6 stories, okay? In all of the situations, though, AFDDs are recommended, okay? So that means that we can't do nothing, okay? So one option is obviously to fit them. The other option is to risk assess them out. So what we've done is we've created you a risk assessment that you can use to record the discussion that you have with the client. AFDDs do have benefits. I don't want it to sound like I'm overly negative towards them. They do have benefits. I'll try my best to prove them wrong, but no, they do have benefits. If the conditions are right, the devices will operate. So if you've got a minimum amount of load current on the circuit, the product standard talks about 2.5 amps, so you need a circuit that's got at least 2.5 amps of load current, and you've got a carbonised path, so if you've got a cable insulation type that carbonises readily, PVC, yeah, then they are potentially, you know, a good option, yeah, and they could prevent fires. I've highlighted residential premises there because that's where you find the vast majority of PVC cabling. Okay, in all of the other types of installations, you're more likely to have a fireproof, you know, insulation material. The other things to note, obviously, AFDDs, they detect arc faults. So arc faults can exist either as a parallel arc or as a serial arc. So a parallel arc is between live conductors or live conductors and earth, and a serial arc is between the same conductor, in essence. With parallel arcing, you do get a better response from using AFDDs. They are more sensitive than perhaps relying on your circuit breaker or your RCD. And for serial arcing, there is only one option. You know, if you want any sort of protection, you've got to use an AFDD. Be aware, though, there are still negatives. So AFDDs do require a minimum load current, as I said, which is 2.5 amps. They are limited in terms of their maximum range. They only go up to 40 amps, so you can only buy a 40 amp version as an absolute max. And if you are installing them, the LED indicators on them are not standardised. Okay, so, you know, just because you've bought a Wilex one, for example, that will have a different fault sequence to, let's say, an Eaton one. Okay, so just be aware of that if you are installing them. Other issues are that they can't be updated. So it could lead to obsolescence in the devices, and each manufacturer actually have proprietary technology that they've patented. Okay, so there are still some issues with them. Okay, time for another question. Sorry for boring you. Time for another question. Is there benefit in increasing the use of AFDDs? Okay, how do we feel about this one? Okay, do we think it's good or not? Russell, do we think we're good or not? Yep.
Okay, 60-40. 60 see a benefit, 65
Okay.
see a benefit, and the others don't.
Okay, no, that's good. That's positive. So 70% of members see a positive benefit of AFDDs. So that means that I'm not doing my job properly. So, I'll try harder. I think that's what that means. Okay, moving on to the next regulation. It's Regulation 422.1, precautions where particular risks of fire exist. This is a pretty major change, actually. This whole section has been totally rewritten. It used to be described in terms of BD2, BD3 and BD4 conditions in terms of evacuation and how overcrowded buildings were, and thinking about how you're going to, what cable types you're going to use within certain locations. There's now a slight change in the actual concept. Okay, so there's a suite of regulations and an appendix that follow. And the idea is something called a protected escape route. So this is supposed to be a fire sterile part of the building that's going to be the main means of escape. And it's something that the electrical designer needs to have input into. Okay, now I'm not saying that, you know, we're best placed, you know, to make that final decision. No, that's not what we're saying. It's probably the closest you can get to where the regs has come into the new terminology of like BIM, okay, and collaborative working. So it's a decision made by the architects, the structural engineers, fire engineers, and the electrical designer to think about how they're going to run their services and not add to the fire load within a building to maintain a means of escape for the longest time that's required by the fire risk assessment usually. 120 minutes, okay? So there's quite a few regulations in there, and then there's an appendix as well, Appendix 13, that gives you a bit more information, okay? So in a protected escape route, the responsible person for the building needs all the design information, okay? So you have an input into that. Cables that used should be inherently fire resistant, so we're talking FP type cabling or potentially mineral insulated. Cables should be as short as possible, and electrical equipment within those locations, within those areas, should be limited. In essence, do not add to the fire load unless absolutely necessary. Okay? Think about the fire sterile zones that we would have in buildings nowadays in terms of stairwells at either end of the building, which are literally just concrete, you know, parts of the building, just to maintain that fire resistance. It's just bringing the holistic aspect into the regs. Okay, so we're moving away from Chapter 42, Protection Against Thermal Effects. We've skipped Chapter 43, Protection Against Overcurrent. Why do you think that is? Because there's no changes in there. And then we're into Chapter 44, okay, Protection Against Electromagnetic Disturbances and Voltage Disturbances. Yes, I'm sad. Okay, so 443.4 is protection against overvoltages from an atmospheric origin, i.e. lightning. And what we used to have was this really dodgy risk assessment. If we didn't want to do it, okay, we had to work out something called the calculated risk level, which was based on a factor in terms of the environment, so that was easy because it was either 850 or 85, and we had to divide that by the likelihood that lightning is going to strike within a certain geographic area, and times it by the length of the supply. And it was always the length of supply that nobody had a clue about. You know, how long's the LV, the HV side, and everyone was just guessing, okay? Thankfully, they got rid of it, okay? It's disappeared. Yes, okay? So it's now much easier and much more straightforward. We've got more of a black and white yes or no, do we or don't we, okay? So from a practitioner's perspective, that's brilliant, okay? In essence, it says, protection against transient overvoltages shall be provided. What did that word shall mean again? Must be provided where the consequences caused by the overvoltage could result in, then we've got three things: serious injury to or loss of human life, a failure of a safety service, I'll come back to that one, or significant financial or data loss, okay? That second one's a little bit iffy, okay? In terms of part 2, if you look up safety services, you will see that wired smokes are classified as a safety service. So anywhere where you've got wired smokes defined as a safety service, I have no choice but to fit SPDs. Okay, so that's where it's black and white, isn't it? Yeah. And to be honest, where they've gone in terms of manufacturing the boards and stuff, most of the boards come pre-populated with over voltage protection anyway, don't they? Okay, so it's nice and easy. Okay, we're doing it basically. Okay, unless, so if we read the second bullet, it says, for all other cases, protection against transient over voltages must be provided unless the owner of the installation declares it is not required due to any loss or damage being a tolerable risk or a tolerable expense. So again, from our perspective as practitioners, that's good, because I can have a conversation with my client. If he or she decides they don't want to do it, cool. I record that discussion down, and that's my evidence. Okay, happy days. Okay, and again, that's basically what it says there, and we have created an ECA SBD risk assessment form for you as well. Okay, trying to make your life as easy as possible. The final couple of slides in terms of part 4, overvoltage protection doesn't just cover atmospheric origin, it also covers transients from switching. So this is just taking account of that. And there's no real technical changes here, it's just the wording's changed. Okay, so they've just clarified the wording. That's it. And then final question, final chance to see Trevor for part 4 is there benefit in increasing the use of SPDs? Yes or no? Okay, so if we can have a little vote on that one. Guys, the voting is and girls, the guys, the voting is really important, sorry. Reason is we're using this excuse to sort of cement our opinions of what you guys think. So when we go to the standards committees, we can go, we've surveyed X hundreds or 1,000 members, and they've suggested that RCD risk assessments are very important, and they use them, okay? So we're going to fight for you to keep them in, okay? So it is very important that you vote on this thing, okay?
Excellent. Well, we've had a good response to that. And
Yes.
85% of the 35 people that have
Yeah.
voted on this, so the numbers are going up.
Yes.
Do you think there's a benefit?
Brilliant, brilliant. Glad to hear it. That's good. Thank you very much. I think that's it. That's it from me. Hopefully that was okay. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Yes? Good, good. Will Smith in? Is he about? Okay, so my name's Paul Barrett. I'm the Regional Specification Manager for the South Coast. I'm just going to go through a bit of an update on what we're doing as a company. Who uses our products, first off? 3000 series or 140? 3000? And 140 is the rest. Okay, interesting. Okay, so this is really about the 140 series. Hopefully this works. Can you hear me all right? So I'm not used to having this. So the 140 series is really what has changed the most. It used to be just the 140 series, so that applied to the heat detectors, ionisation, and also optical. So now it's just the two, so we've dropped out the ionisation detection. It's just the 146E and the 144E. Okay, so the optical smoke alarm and the heat alarm. So the main things that have changed really is that the optical chamber, the bit that does all the work really, is now based on the 3016, which is our flagship optical detector, which makes it more reliable effectively. Also it has automatic dust compensation within it. Okay, so what that means is if it's not being maintained properly, it's not being hoovered, that kind of thing, then it just recalibrates itself up to 36 times. So that's within that now. And it's also slimmer, so it looks better on the ceiling. Reduction in power consumption is all important at the moment. You're looking roughly, people ask me, especially at the moment with tenants we deal mainly with social housing, and quite obviously people are really concerned about their electricity bills and what's going to go on their ceiling. You're looking at roughly between 30 pence and 40 pence a year per detector, just as a rough kind of gauge. So it's still got the same branding, so the blue top there is the 140 series, green and red, so green is your optical and red is your heat detector. As I said, just much slimmer looking, nicer on the ceiling, and the 144 as well. Still the same price as well, we just had a price increase, or we're about to have a price increase actually, I think tomorrow. So the key point here really is the ionisation 141 is gone. Lots of people used to use those because they're cheap. Normally in the hall and the landing, and the problem with that is that they are prone to nuisance alarms. So it's not false alarms, it's nuisance alarms. Okay, so they put them where they shouldn't go. So we had to take a bit of a stance and say, look, we're going to remove that product from the market, not just because of that, but because of the environmental impact. So it has a piece of radioactive material in it, which obviously you don't want to be throwing in the landfill these days. So you can see the exchange there. So the 141 is just the 146 is your go-to detector. The 144 obviously normally in the kitchen or garage, and yeah, the 146 wherever else. So the new stuff, has anyone seen this? The Gateway Internet of Things? It's not good. Good job on doing it. Okay, so the Gateway basically is a way of transferring all the information from a given site to whoever needs to see it. So it was based on what social landlords wanted. So they wanted to be more compliant and keep an eye on what was going on. When I say keep an eye on, it's all GDPR approved, everything else. It's not actually watching people, but it's just keeping them safe, basically. So you can see there at the top, you've got your basic alarm. Then you've got an environmental sensor at the bottom there, and that's really key. That's where the market's kind of going. So we do two types. There's the 1020, which measures humidity and heat and cold. So net zero is a really big issue at the moment, as we all know. And then we do the same again, same detector, 1025, but it also measures air quality. So CO2, not CO. So carbon monoxide, CO2 is carbon dioxide. So it's been really influential with COVID as it is. So you can measure parts per million in a given room. So all that information, all those insights goes to the Gateway, a cloud-based product, sends all that information to a web portal, and as long as you've got internet connection, you can view it. Obviously, this gives the landlord more kind of an insight as to what's going on. Cloud-based, mains-powered installation, so fixed spur. It works on a SIM, so people think it's on Wi-Fi. It's not. And the reason for that is network coverage, firstly, and also the fact that if someone moves out, they're going to take their Wi-Fi with them, so they're going to be left with nothing in the property. All managed on a desktop dashboard, and then set up just on your smartphone. It's really, really simple to use. So as I said, environmental sensors, two of them, temperature, humidity, and CO2, and they're just lithium cells, so no cable involved. Just stick them on the wall, it's done. As I said, this is just gives a better maintained, healthier home, so it keeps the occupant healthier, basically. So if someone's decided to dry their clothes on a heater, for example, and there's lots of moisture, that's going to create damp and mould, and that could become an issue. It's all about insight, so it's slightly different. With the alarms, it's actually sending an alert, so if it's a CO activation or a fire activation, obviously you need to know about that pretty rapidly. With the actual environmental sensors, it's different, so it's a build-up of insights, lots of different information going to the web portal that you can use in the future. So as I said, they're the 3 devices or devices available that can be linked to the gateway. It is backward compatible as well, so you can link older detectors to the system if you want to. Am I going backwards or forwards? Backwards. Yeah, and the platform really simple. So as I said, if you've got your web, if you link to the internet, whatever it is, so it could be a tablet, it could be your laptop or your phone, and just to install, you would use the mobile app, all completely free. And the resident too actually gets an app, so they can monitor what's going on in their property. And that's it. Any questions? That's nice and easy. Thanks, gents and ladies.
3 mics and 1 phone. This is complicated stuff. Right, qualification. So you don't need to get an 18th edition Amendment 2 qualification. What you will need to do for your next assessment is show that you've got an understanding of the changes. So you're here today, hopefully you're awake, fingers crossed. That'll get you a very good understanding of the major changes. When you do get back home later on, have a look on the ECA website. We have got shed loads of free guides on there to all the major changes. We've got one that's a top 10. We'll go into the AFDDs. We've got one that covers off the protected escape routes, a short one and a long one. Get a copy of them. They're all free, like free. Download them, have a read of them. And then when you have your next audit, your next assessment, somebody's going to come around and say, what do you know about the Amendment 2? Right, know all of it. It says this, it does that, and that's how it affects me. So you don't need to have a new qualification. All QSs, qualified supervisors, need to have an 18th edition qualification. So just make sure that you guys are aware of that. In terms of your next assessment, I wonder if you've actually noticed. Have you seen when you're having your audits? Have things changed a little bit? Are they asking for more stuff? Yeah? One person's nodded, so that gives me the green light to talk about this for 20 minutes. The assessments are changing. They're going through an upskilling, for want of a better phrase. They're going to be asking for more things, different things, stuff that some of you will have never seen or done before. And this is actually a really good thing. It means that proper audits for proper companies will be done to make sure that the work is being done correct. We've got some slides at the end that will cover some of our benefits off for you. We've got a really good piece of software that you guys can use that costs nothing, it's free, called Econs. That'll help you with your assessment, with your audit. So you need to prove that you've got continuing professional development, some CPD. That and this will help with all of that. So you don't need a qualification, but you do need to know what the changes are, and you do need to have some CPD. We've covered the jacket.
Okay, while you're reading, I'll just
just
touch on a couple of things. When Shahid was going through and talking about AFDDs, he referred to higher risk residential buildings, HRRBs. Okay. It's quite a confusing term at this moment in time because HRRBs were originally high-rise residential buildings. Okay. Following Grenfell and the consultation process and the draft Building Safety Act, there was a term in there which was higher risk residential buildings. Okay. At that point in time, that was for residential buildings or buildings which contain at least 2 residences over 10 stories. Okay. Now, during the consultation, that came down, and a new term was used in the draft bill, which is called a HRB, which is higher risk building. And as Shahid rightly said, that's for 6-storey buildings and above, with 2 residences. Or, as later defined by the Secretary of State, so 2 other types of building have come into that as well, which is hospitals and care homes, but that may extend later on. So this is a draft bill at this moment in time. Hopefully, the building safety bill, which will come and act later on this year, potentially July. Okay. At this moment in time, our regs and the Act are not in sync. Okay. So just watch out for those terminologies being used for the next few months, and make sure that you agree with your client what you're working to. Okay. Because other areas of M&E and sprinklers, for instance, have an 11-metre height threshold as well. So it just makes the whole thing a little bit confusing until that Act is enacted and the secondary legislation also comes in. So I just wanted to point that out.
Do you know, I was talking to a consultant the other day, and they designed a building that was 10.95 metres high, just to get away from putting sprinklers in.
It's happened a few times,
Yeah. So, yeah, it's an important point. Just be careful if you're involved in that, where you're sitting. Another question here. Do fire-safe cables protect arc fault in accessory or in connected equipment? I'm not 100% sure what that question means, so I'll answer something totally different. No, I'll try and answer something on that one. So, AFDDs work with a carbonated path. If you've got 10 minutes afterwards, please go and talk to Shahid. He'll tell you all about this.
Just on that, we actually, on the website, we have some guides on there. We've done some presentations. Actually, it is quite difficult to sustain an arc through air, and that's why you need something that is going to carbonise that path, okay? LSF cable, or LSOH, uses a cross-linked polyethylene type construction that doesn't carbonise. So your modern LSF cables will not carbonise, and it will not have a path. So you need some other material to make that arc path. So a lot of people won't tell you that, okay? So Shahid's got some guides on. Look at the website, please, and then you'll understand where we're coming from. We're not negative, it's just some of the claims that are being made don't ring true.
Yeah, so if you've got PVC cables, yes. Oh, yes.
Sorry, no, I was just going to let you finish off. There was one question I haven't got the answer I was going to ask you.
Yeah, go fire away.
Why are we not including arc flash assessments on our 18th edition amendment number 2?
Good question. Arc flash risk assessment is not really recognised in the UK. It's not a bad concept. If any of you guys have come across it, it's a bang in a box, and it's an American calculation based on if you're working in a box and it goes bang, how much and how far out and how big the bang is will depend on what you need to do. And if you're stood next to a big supply with a big bang, you have to get dressed up like you're going into a volcano. If you're further back and it's a smaller bang, you might only need gloves or goggles. And it gives zones as to how far and where you need to do and where you need to be. The general concept in the UK, though, is don't work live. So if you're working with the power off, you don't need to consider arc flash. If you're working with the power on, depending on what you're doing, then you can consider it. But technically, unless you're very, very careful, we can't really work live.
Which is bizarre, because the risk of your flash is when you're energising, not when you're de-energising.
In what, in turning the board on, or?
Yeah. So if you're switching on low, that's when the risk is there. It's just one of the things I've just observed. That's all.
Yeah.
It annoys me that you've got everything else on there, and yet this major thing that protects electricians from serious and nasty injuries is omitted.
It's not saying that it's a bad thing, it's just not considered as part of what we normally do. You're welcome to do it, and in some cases, if you're working for a client who's American-based, they insist on it in certain factories and certain environments. And it's not a bad concept. But if you're working with everything off and you've got a cover on, then you are energising and you haven't got the bang in a box. But it's never a bad thing to put PPE on. But it's not covered off in the 18th. We have got, actually, funnily enough, another free guide on arc flash risk assessment. You can download it.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, we've got plenty of them. We did PVC cables work on AFDDs. Will the arc fault signature change over time? If not, do we need to reprogram? The good question again, see Shahid afterwards, he'll cover you those. AFDDs are effectively a microcomputer. That's what they are. They're a very, very clever little device. And they are a program inside them. If the manufacturer changes that program, that code, it's potentially obsolete. So just be wary with some of them that you can't update them. Some of them you can. So if you're fitting AFDDs, be wary that that one might change. It might come out of date. It might alter. So yeah, there's a few issues with them. Do we need to install SPDs on smoke alarm circuits? I think we covered that a little bit with the safety services, didn't we? So yeah, safety service is a smoke alarm service. So an SPD now needs to go on a smoke alarm in domestics. This is a good one. Will there be any future introductions to emergency lighting within the home? Probably not. 7671 is one standard. BS 5266 is the emergency lighting standards. And as weird as it sounds, if you were in this building doing a condition report, unless the emergency light is dangling off and showing exposed live parts, you don't comment on it. You're being asked to look at the electrical installation, not the fire alarms, not the emergency lighting. If you walked into the toilet and the tap was flooding all over the floor, you'd probably mention that. You know, it's a sensible thing to say, but you're not checking the taps. Equally, you'd probably mention about the emergency lighting, but you're not doing an emergency lighting assessment, you're doing an electrical condition report. So it's a different thing, so it probably won't be coming in. That said, it's not a bad idea in some cases. Arc protection in care homes, I would like to ask what code you would give care home when you don't have an arc fault protector. That's a good question. We've had a good chat about this previously. And what we tend to think is, just because a reg's changed, doesn't make what we did yesterday dangerous. So if you wired a care home last week, why would you go out and fail it next week? So unless there's any real definite evidence that it is dangerous, there's a problem, for me, I would always say that's a C3. Sound about right? Yeah. So if you go in and you can see there's cables burning, arcing, there's damage being caused, or you know that in that particular care home there's vermin, for instance, you've got rats or ants, then you might want to consider that as being a little bit more onerous. But 99.9% of the time, if you did it yesterday, it's probably just a C3 tomorrow. We're not in it to go around and fail installations left, right and centre. We're not condemning stuff that we've done. Things have moved on, things have changed, but there's no need to fail it if it's still electrically safe and sound. So most of the time, I would say it'd be a C3.
The only caveat I would give to that is if on the back of the building safety bill there was a requirement in secondary regulation or legislation to have that care home up to the latest edition and amendment. So it's possible that it could get included, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's always worth checking with clients and insurance providers on this sort of thing because they might want it. And irrelevant of whether you've got XLPE cable, irrelevant of whether you've got less than 2.5 amps, some consultants are just speccing them and fitting them anyway. They might not work, they might not do anything, but that's what some people are saying. Those questions came through on that Eventi app, so I appreciate the signal in here is a little bit dubious. We're going to have a break shortly. Have you got the clicker there, Mike?
Possibly somewhere.
No, it's hidden up here.
on there.
So we're going to have a little break now. We all good? There you go. Go on, we're not here to enjoy ourselves. Thanks for that. Thanks for coming back down quickly. On this rolling slide is the special offer coming up next, I think, for the discounted books. Keep an eye on that code, ECA 2903. That'll get you the discounted books from NIC. And at some point on here, you'll see this little guy. He's doing a little wander up on the Inca Trail. Well, he was supposed to do it about 3 years ago. He's doing it for charity. So if anybody's feeling ever so generous, please sponsor Luke. He'll very much appreciate that. There's lots of other little info on there. We'll run through those at the end with you if you've got any questions. Right, let's see if this works. Ooh, part 5 now. So we're going to start off with part 5. One other thing I forgot to mention earlier. We've got access to this building until 3:30. I mean, I won't be here then, but you're welcome to be. You can go upstairs, have a chat with the guys and girls upstairs. There's also a little Scalextric simulator up there that you can have a play on, apparently. So feel free to go upstairs, have a look at all the goodies that we've got and have a look at all the toys. And if you can go home with a free Mercedes, fair play to you. Right, part 5 now. So this is all about the selection and erection of the equipment. So Shahid talked about the safety element of it and looking at where we need to consider certain things. This now talks about when you're installing things. And there's been a few changes here that are hopefully quite useful for you. First one is a very small change to a little reg in 511.1, and it talks about compliance with other standards. Now, it refers to other IEC or Senelec standards being adequate for equipment. Previously, it used to talk about equipment having a British standard associated with it. Now it's highlighted that as long as equipment has got an IEC or Senelec standard, you can use it, which might be useful for using certain types of cable. Not sure what type of cable, YS maybe, something like that. So it might be useful if you're using different types of cable that has got an IEC or a Senelec standard on it. 514, protective conductors, clarified a little grey area previously that some people used to run a 3-core flex and then sleeve up the green and yellow for one reason or another. It's clarified now that can't be done. Green and yellow is for earthing. So even if you sleeve it, ends, it's got to be all the way through the conductor. So no 3-core flexes used as switch wires, which is quite handy really because you see that quite often. This other one, only a very small change, very minor, but it might affect some of you. And it's highlighted that where you've got functional earthing conductors, it used to be cream colour. Now, it's a nice colour of pink. So that'll look good on your toolbox, won't it? Nice pink sleeving. Just on this one, if you've got a combined functional and protective conductor, the protective takes precedent. So it will be a green and yellow conductor. You might want to label it. You might want to put a little sleeve on it saying it's a functional earthing or some description. But the protective element takes precedent. So if you've got an installation with a bit of both in, green and yellow. Out of interest here, how many people work in dwellings? Quite a few? Excellent. Right, this is a change that will hopefully make your life a little bit easier. There's a lot of words on here, I'll explain what it means. The wiring reg says you have to put a lot of stickers on. I think I made a joke last time about the only good thing with the boards being so big is you can get all the stickers on that you need. It's now changed to say there's a lot less identification and labels and stickers needed in a dwelling. So a lot of the stickers that you have to put on that nice distribution board, that nice consumer unit that you've put on the wall and then covered in yellow stickers have gone. I think it was possibly Darren was telling me a story about how he saw somebody trying to steam the stickers off a consumer unit with a kettle. Didn't make anybody on. So they've removed a lot of the requirements. A new addition to there states that a typical circuit chart is not needed in a dwelling, and circuit charts and diagrams have to conform to certain sizes and fonts, and that's covered off in Appendix 11. So there's no need in a dwelling now to provide periodic test label, RCD or SPD stickers. So a lot of them have been removed. What you have to do is give the client the information. Now you can still put the stickers on if you want, but you have to give the client the information. And that can go over in like a little handover pack. And that's really easy because then they can lose it, which they will. We've got an example handover pack on our website. You can download and you can use that as a template. And that will show you how and where and what to lay this pack out like. So it's removed all those labels from dwellings. There is still the requirement for where you've got an alternate source. So if you've got a solar PV system, for instance, you still need to provide an identification and label for that. And there is also a new requirement for SPDs, but that's not needed in dwellings. So if you're doing an installation like this, you need to provide identification for SPDs. If you're doing it in your own house, you don't need to. So hopefully that's a nice little change for you. We've put this one in, and it's not a massive change, to be honest, but we wanted to clarify it because, well, how do I put it? We're not into selling. So we're not selling you anything here today. There's a line being added that talks about RCBOs and how they should be considered. Just considered. To avoid nuisance tripping. It definitely does not say you must use RCBOs. So if anybody says you must use RCBOs, that is not the case. It says consider their use in dwellings. It's a bit of a silly one because yesterday I could consider their use. 2 years ago I could consider their use. I can consider their use tomorrow. Doesn't mean I have to fit them. It's just saying it's an option. So just to be clear, it's saying you can look at them, you can consider them. They are an option. Of course they're better, but guess what? They're more costly. So consider them, decide whether or not they're needed. They will give you a better protection, but you don't have to fit them. So we just wanted to put that in to clarify. While we're on RCDs, there's a new element that talks about AC RCDs. So we're familiar with the different types of RCDs, A's, ACs, B's. They've been around for a while now, I think. ACs can now only be used where you've got a circuit that you know contains no DC elements to it. Basically a resistive load. That's all it is, which is very few and far between. Most RCDs that you'll be fitting will be of a type A. In some cases you might need a type B. If you are doing installations where you need a B or an F type, be really careful what the spec says, what the requirements are. The big difference between an A and a B is about 200-300 quid. So don't leave yourself hanging in a situation where you've got an installation that requires a B-type RCD and you're fitting an A, because otherwise it's very expensive. AC-type RCDs, as I say, only used now where you've got a pure resistive load, which isn't that many. It's getting harder to buy AC-type RCDs, to be fair. Most of them that you get from the wholesalers are A-type as a bare minimum. So just be mindful of those. There is a big cost difference going from an A to a B. While we're still on RCDs, this is an awkward little one. It was BS7288 sockets, RCD sockets and spurs. That was always listed in the regs as an option. And then a few years ago, it got removed. It just wasn't in there. So in theory, if you were fitting an RCD socket or spur, you had to put that down as a departure. Our friends at NIC did a really good magazine article about it and explained why it was. That's been put back in now. So BS7288 sockets, RCD sockets, have been put back in, and it states they are now suitable for additional protection. So if you were ever putting down departures on RCD sockets and the likes, you don't need to anymore. That's been reintroduced. So that's just a useful thing, I think. Hopefully it'll be a helpful one for you. Where circuits are likely to experience high protective conductor currents, we always have to terminate the earths in different terminals of the sockets. Yeah, one on that side, in and out, in and out. It's just been highlighted that that's no longer necessary. So if you're doing condition reports on an office or a school with IT equipment in theory, previously, if you'd noticed you had all the cables in one earth terminal, that would be something you'd flag up, probably a C3. It's now changed to say, actually, that doesn't matter. You can put all the cables in the same terminal, so you don't have to have one. So it's just a small change, but something that is quite useful in some cases. Right, while we're still on earthing and bonding, this is a really small element, but it might impact some people massively, and it's a really good one. This is something that, you know, I mentioned earlier about the DPC and getting involved. This is something that an ECA member influenced getting changed, because he was having a real nightmare with this. Where you've got an outbuilding on an installation, as it stood last week, you have to design the bonding in that outbuilding with reference to the bonding in the mains. What I mean by that is if you've got a big building, an office, factory, whatever, and you're running 200 metres up to a security hut, that office factory might need, if it's PME, 50mm bonding. TNS might need 25. You're running a cable all the way up to the smoker's hut or the security guard's shelter. Might only be a 10mm cable, there's no load in there. If that building had some extraneous parts in it that required bonding, you had to run a bloody great big earth with it, 50 or 25mm, because you had to bond that in relation to what's in the mains. This change has altered that requirement. Only for TT and TNS systems, so not PME, it now says you can design the bonding in that outbuilding in relation to the incoming feeder cable. So if that smoker's hut, that shelter, that security cabin, whatever it may be, if that had a 6mm cable, a 10mm cable going to it, and it had some extraneous parts in, and the building was on TNS, I can bond that in relation to the incoming cable. I don't have to bond it with a 25mm. Now, I don't know about you guys, I think that's a really sensible change, because it wasn't necessary, it was expensive, and it was a waste of material. Not good things all around. So a really small change, but something that is going to impact some members massively. So I'll leave that one on there for a little bit, because it's a funny one to get your head around at times. You size the bonding in and out building in relation to the incoming feeder, not in relation to the origin, but only on TNS and TT, not on PME systems. So that's a really good positive change that an ECA member came up with, and I'm proud to say that that's managed to get itself into 7671. So that's a really good bit of good news. Hopefully, that is nice and clear. But if not, did you all manage to get the Eventi app when you're upstairs? Yeah? If you do, I don't know if you've looked at it, the guys who were asking questions earlier, you can ask questions on the app. We'll pick them up at the end or as we're going through. So if you do have any questions, fire them away. Right. That's that done. Unfortunately, I have to introduce my friend Darren now. Hello, Darren. Yeah.
Morning.
It's twice I didn't get a clap, by the way. I'm not like sulking or anything, but I don't want to be here anymore. I'm going home.
Thank you, Gary.
Best of luck.
So, just don't adjust your eyesight. I am this small, and obviously I'm new to the ECA, so bear with me. But obviously, many of you know me. I've been, know a lot of contractors here. I come from a contracting background, and mostly, funny enough, inspection and test. So I'm afraid you're lumbered with me for the next few minutes. You can see why they employed me. So, test inspection, okay? It's always been in the wiring regulations that you should test, especially IR testing, during and post-installation. That's always been there. In the previous regulations, we could just put it in and do a blanket 250 IR test. That's now been removed, okay? So it's a two-stage process. So if you are installing now, install and test a 500 volt DC, and then with your connected equipment, you can run the 250 volt test on there as well, okay? So if you're doing a lot of EICR works, or you're doing a lot of circuits, new buildings, this will probably take a little bit longer to run these tests. But just be aware that the option now for a blanket 250 test has gone. RCD testing. So Gary alluded to earlier that there are many different types of RCD, okay? Now, there is no ×5 test. BS 7671 only requires a ×1 test, which should now speed up installation. So that is irrelevant if it's fault protection, so if you're on a TT system or you're using fault protection because your earth loops are too high, or additional. You now just record the ×1. There's no requirement in BS 7671 anymore. That's only if you're working to Amendment 2. to do the ×5. However, your contractual requirements may require that anyway, some software may require it. But this should speed up your RCD testing, okay? And what we're looking for there is below 300 milliseconds. Time delayed, I think 130 to 500 milliseconds. Okay, so this should mean that it's quicker and easier doing your RCD testing. Okay, now also, you may, especially who's involved, I'll come to those questions later. I was going to say, people who are involved with solar PV, electric vehicle charging, there's different types of RCD for that. And basically, they're more complex, they're looking at DC component, and they're more expensive. However, the regulations have always said, and they still do say, there's no requirement to test anything other than the AC side. So in BS 7671, it just asks you to test at the AC element. There's no requirement to test, especially with EVs, that's 6 milliamp detection. There's no requirement for that at all, okay? So your standard MFTs that you've used yesterday, you can use tomorrow, okay? So you don't have to rush out and buy new MFTs or new RCD testers for the new RCDs. You can test that if you want, but there's no requirement under BS 7671, okay? So some of you might have seen that table in Appendix 3 that gave you the half-time values, the 1 times, I think it might have a 2 and a 5, okay? That's now been removed. So if you ever want to look at that table again, keep your blue book, because it's now been removed from the cappuccino book. Okay. So, many of you have been involved with new installations. There's never been a requirement or a space that if you're working, for example, replacing a distribution board in part of a building, so just say it was in this room, you may not have access to the incomer or the bonding or other bits and pieces as well. So your purpose, your job, your requirements are to change that distribution board, or to put that circuit in, or to do this. You can't look around the whole building. Yet you are being asked to be responsible for it. Well, no, you're not. You can make comments on new installation certificates to say you're in a building XYZ, and your task is that. You've not looked somewhere else. If there was a socket hanging off a wall in an office that wasn't related to your work, so you wouldn't be responsible for that. So there is now place on certificate. So you can, where reasonably practical, note that down on there. So just record what's feasible. So this will probably be, you know, for those who are working on larger installations, for example. So certification and reporting. So although this is not in part 6, we've just moved it to, because it makes a good time now to talk to you about what's happened to the model forms, okay? There's still the same 3 forms, okay? We can't get away from those. Your installation certificate, your EICR for your periodics, and your minor works. But a few things have changed. Bad news for anybody who likes lots and lots of paperwork. So that 116 checkboxes, we've now reduced just to 14 boxes. Hey, so we've saved you lots of boxes to tick, which is fantastic. And let's have a party. Matches my jacket, doesn't it? So we've consolidated that down to 14 boxes. Okay. The aid memoir is still there. So the old checkboxes are there as a reference, but you no longer need to complete them, okay? Okay, so we've reduced that down, okay? It's still there in Appendix 6 as an aid memoir. If you're doing periodics, the 116 boxes, maybe a few more, we haven't counted, are still there. So it's still there for periodics, you don't need to do it. So this should speed up your installation certificates. So, some of you have noticed as well, and this is no surprise, that the schedule of test results and schedule of inspections is now over 2 pages. There's only a few more boxes, but we couldn't fit it all on, it wasn't legible. So we've got AFDDs, we're recording the SPDs. Many of you will use software anyway, Electrical M, Trimble, Fast Test. Those programs naturally have split this over 2 pages. So now it's been split over 2 pages, which is really, really handy, because you know that guide Gary talked about where you could give a handover pack to your customer? One of those pages now is naturally your circuit schedule. So you can include that in your client handover pack. You can print that off separately and put it in your board schedule. You know, put it inside your distribution boards. So it's really handy for that, okay? Importantly as well, if you're working to Amendment 2, certify an Amendment 2. So where Gary said before, you can't chop and change your regulations, you can't chop your amendments, you can't pick and choose. Again, if you're choosing to install to Amendment 2, which you can do from today, you must use the Amendment 2 forms. Likewise, if you've done an installation to Amendment 1, you can't use the Amendment 2 forms. You must use the correct certificate amendment for what you're installing to. Okay? There's a few little tweaks and some little guidance on there as well, just some very small changes. The minor work certificate has just had a small minor adjustment really for the AFDD, so it's worth just having a little look over those, okay? It's just some small minor changes to that, but there is a suite of model forms. So to adopt Gary's term, because he says he's Northern even though he lives in the Midlands, that free is good, okay? So we've got editable PDF forms to use, so the whole suite is there. So if you're doing EICR reports, you can use our forms, minor works, they're all there in the new format. So again, if you're using your own certification software, check that's updates. If you've developed your own, so some contractors do their own forms, again, these are model forms, base it on your model forms, but again, just use the correct form for what you're installing to. And that's really it for part 6, not too much of a change. Now it's part 7. So this is special locations. There are lots and lots of little changes through here, and we can't go through the whole lot today. What we're going to say is, if you're working in a special location, and many of you probably are, look through section 7, okay, and find the area specific to you. We're going to highlight some major changes today, but there are lots and lots of them. They may impact your business, they may not. Okay. One that affects the whole of section 7 is SELV, sorry. Okay? Typically, this would be a wire-wound transformer for a separated extra low voltage. These days, it's all moved to solid state. Solid state doesn't fail safe, so the use of SELV has been removed from a lot of sections, a lot of parts across 7. So have a look at that in great detail. Here's my little rubber ducky. So those of you who like to put a washing machine or a tumble dryer or a TV in your bathroom, you can now move it a bit closer, okay? You can now put the socket 2.5 meters away. So if you are installing, a utility room in your shower room, then you can move that just a little bit closer, okay? This probably may affect you if you're doing EICRs to Amendment 2, okay? So it's just a very small change. So it's gone down from 3 meters to 2.5. Okay, those of you who might be working on construction sites, there's some small changes here. Okay, some enhanced cable protection about if you really do need to run cables over a roadway, some more mechanical protection on that. And also, there's some more guidance on isolation for pre-assembled electrical assemblies, so ASCs. So have a look around that if you're involved with construction sites, temporary supplies, etc. Medical locations. Big changes here. Lots and lots and lots. I don't know if there's anyone here, show of hands, who works in medical locations, but there is so many changes here. We're not going to go through it today, but we have a great guide on this. So look at section 710. Lots and lots of changes in terms of, I think, distribution boards, EBBs, again, SELV. So have a really good look at this. But there is an ECA guide on this if you want to download. I think that's available now. If you're involved in exhibitions, stands, shows, there's more reliance now on 30 milliamp RCD protection. Okay, so you have a good read of that. Also, some new requirements on luminaires. So that's really safety, touching, distance. So what luminaires to use, where they should be positioned as well. Again, if you're working in this environment, then have a good read of that. Solar PV. So this is now an established technology. Okay, so it's 14 pages. There's much more detail in this, and there's lots of changes: design, cable selection, labelling, and use for other current devices. So now it's an established technology. There's more in the regs for it. Okay. We've got Trevor coming out in a minute, so just another poll. Is your business, or has it been, involved with solar PV? So we're going to let the bird fly. I'll move out of the way. Here he goes. certainly if your business hasn't been, it may well be in the future, obviously with the energy sort of price rises. So I know more consumers are looking at this. What have we got, Luke?
Okay, 6 people so far, so 10. So, yeah, sorry, it seems to take a while to come through, and I guess that doesn't help. Okay, with 14 people, we've got 71% of people do, and 29 don't.
Okay.
Which is higher than I expected.
So this is going to be quite relevant to you, actually. So solar PV, it's been updated. So it's all those connected to the network in parallel and alternative. It's not just buildings, it does also cover sort of small solar farms as well. So if you're involved in solar farm builds, I know a couple of you are, then this is also relevant to you. Okay. So a few little changes on there. The DC side must always be considered energised at all times. But BS 7671 does recognise that some panels, for example, have voltage optimisation which defaults down to 1 volt DC in the event of a fault, or in the event of a fault. So therefore, essentially, that is a safe system. On the installation side itself, okay, emphasis on double reinforced insulation, okay, or extra low voltage. And the equipment, so we're talking about the modules, the wiring system, combiners, etc., they must be all class 2 or equivalent. Okay, so designing a solar PV system uses sort of similar notation and similar sort of calculations to your standard electrical calculations, just as a lot more notation now. So really do look at this and the definitions because they have been updated. There are more of them. Just an example there, STC is standard test conditions. You can grab Luke after to talk about what they are, but they're standardising some of this as well. Okay, there are some, we talked about there's more reliance on overcurrent protection now, so most domestic installations are typically under 2 strings. If you're over that, then these new conditions apply, and they want that all strings be the same voltage, so either the same amount of modules or done with voltage optimizers. Okay. Just to emphasize on that, that type B RCD should be used, okay, which is not a new thing, unless the inverter provides that simple separation, okay, or the installation is providing that simple separation, okay, or the manufacturer of the inverter says it's not needed. And that brings us down to the extra requirements here. SPDs, installation monitoring, that's all required unless the manufacturer states otherwise. So it's a really good thing to engage with the manufacturer and also check their requirements. Outdoor lighting. So a few of you might be involved in outdoor lighting here. Part of this is probably going to be relevant to all of you, part of it not. So the bonding conductor inside a street light now lamp must be sized with table 54.8. So you're going to have to be using a bit more green and yellow. Now the additional protection. So I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, quite a few years ago, a young 7-year-old boy was fatally killed in a pub garden by touching some lighting. So this is why this has been brought in. Okay. So we've all been to beer gardens and pub gardens, so that unfortunately a 7-year-old lost his life. So they've brought in now the additional requirements to have RCD protection on lighting, which is accessible in public gardens. EVs, wow. Amendment 1 was all about electric vehicles anyway, so we're not going to go too much on that, but they have removed, there was a part there where you could put a 3-phase charger on a 3-phase network and consider it balanced. It might have been balanced today, but it won't be balanced tomorrow. So that's been removed, okay? And there is a new document, approved document S. So even though that's not part of the wiring regulations, it's a new approved document. So if you are involved with EV installations, then it'd be a good idea to download that. And of course, that is free. Just do a search online for that, and that'll be obviously through the building regs. So another question. We've got Trevor coming out in a minute. How many of you get involved with electric vehicle installations? He's fine out there. I don't have to duck for this one, you see. How many of you are eco-friendly warriors of driving electric vehicles or installing electric vehicles, Luke?
3 more seconds. 69% do, 31% don't.
So a high proportion of you are involved in electric vehicle. So again, we're using this information as well, like Luke said before, for our own information we're giving out to people. So we can keep an eye, any information you feed back today, we take that away and we'll produce some guides for you to help. Heating systems. So this hasn't really changed, it's just been moved. But here it's just to emphasise on, if you are installing electric heating systems, okay, make sure adequate protection for your cabling, and also your handover documentation. I don't know if you've ever read the section on this, but a lot of people fall short on it, where if you're handing over an electric heating installation, there's a whole list of about 13 items that should be in that handover pack. So it's just to remind you, if you are involved in this, or you're looking to be involved in this, make sure you read those requirements. It's quite an extensive list. And really, that was it. That was a sort of whirlwind tour of Section 7. Some things have changed, some things haven't. So really have a good look through those regulations as well, because I'd imagine everyone's involved in some part, shape, way or form in that. And now, I'm going to hand over to Signify.
I don't know if you guys have noticed, but dotted around the room are some little white Dalek-y looking things, some UVC lights from Signify. If you do get a chance, have a chat with these guys. They are very clever little products that help to nullify any diseases in the air.
So I was going to mention that.
Oh, do you want to do it? Yeah, you could probably do it better than me.
Yeah, so there's 3 UVC units. They look like the last few pieces you've got Daleks next to you. There are UVC offerings. They use ultraviolet light. Is this on? Can you hear me there?
Yeah.
Okay, good. It uses ultraviolet light, category C lighting, to break down bacteria and
I really like
viruses.
you.
Yeah, me too. Great. It's good to know you. What you've got in here, and here you only need 2, but we stuck 3 in here. It's offering you an additional layer of protection against COVID, influenza, pretty much every known pathogen and bacterial infection there is in an airborne way. This is the future. The regs are changing. People are pushing to change the ventilation in buildings, but it's not always a viable option. With the use of UVC, you guys as contractors can go in and retrofit this product. It doesn't need too much planning. We'll train you as contractors, but there is a whole range, and I'd strongly recommend that you come upstairs and chat to us. It's something that we're very passionate about. Okay, sorry to hijack you there.
No, that's good. Wanted to mention that because it is quite a good little product. We had a trip down to go see the guys at Signify, and they had some wonderful bits on the ceiling. So we've got a couple of questions in. First one, is it possible to get a copy of the slideshow? Yeah, after these events are finished, it'll be on the ECA website, and free of charge. Again, we like free of charge. This one's less of a question, but I'm going to look over there. We use Cal 18 PPE. Is that you guys? Or is that somebody else? That's you. Cal 18 PPE is part of our risk assessment, so for arc flash, I'm guessing that is. Is the schedule of inspections still there for EICRs? Yes. So there's still 100 odd ticky boxes for condition reports. Sorry, I was out the room. Did you mention about the schedule of inspections dropped?
14 boxes now.
Yeah, that's good news, isn't it? We're happy with that, aren't we? Yeah, about time. On the electrical installation, is there anything saying what I should inspect? I don't know if Darren covered that. The items that you inspect are still listed in the back of the regs. So you can print them off, laminate them, keep them once. You don't have to just fill them in. They're there as an aide-memoire for you to go around and have a look at what you should inspect. I wonder if it's really necessary. I think hopefully we all know what we're doing at this stage. But it's still there as a little reminder what you should be looking for. On an electrical... oh yeah, we've done that one. Oh, how do you test an AFDD? Good question. Mostly you don't. Simple as that. Some of them have got a test button on. It just tests the mechanical components within them. But you don't have a tester for them. You just press the button if there is one such thing there. Do ECA have test certs? Yeah, we've got loads of them on our website. Guess how much they are? Hey, there's a theme here. Yeah, got loads of editable Amendment 2 version of the ECA test certificate. If you've got software, great, use that, that's no bother. If you are stuck and you need to use ours, they're on there, you can download them, you can use them, it'll help fill a gap for you. Just on the test certs, do make sure, you know, we said right at the very beginning, about 8 hours ago, that you be careful which edition of the wiring regs you work into. If you are building something to Amendment 2, use Amendment 2 certificates. If you're building something to Amendment 1, use Amendment 1 certificates. I guess this is over here. Does a street light, private street lighting require 30 milliamp RCD protection? Who is that? Who is that one? Yeah, it would do. We were just double checking there, whilst Signify were up, and the reg does exclude street lighting, but it does talk about private lighting. So if you've got an external light, that would need RCD protection if it's accessible to the public. And do manufacturer's instructions still override BS 7671, i.e. amount of panels on a string? The way the regs are wrote is it says you must take account of manufacturer's instructions. So you look at what they say, and if they say you can do something different, then yeah, of course you can. A bit like if you look at a circuit breaker, and it's got values in 7671 of the maximum ZS's. If you go to the manufacturer, they might give you different values for the maximum ZS's, which might actually give you a little bit more leeway on some of the tests that you're doing. So yeah, always refer to manufacturer's instructions because they're the people who define what you need to do with that particular product or piece of equipment. So yeah, you would do. And that's all of them for now. Right. Promised you a new part earlier, and we've got a new part. And he's called Luke. Luke. Hello. This is our colleague Luke Osborne, and he's going to come up and talk to you now all about Part 8. And somebody asked about prosumers around here. Was it you? Yeah. Hey!
Thank you very much, Mr. Parker.
You're welcome. Luke will tell you all about prosumers. Now, best of luck, everyone.
Thank you very much. Obviously, you've been waiting for this. But no, it is reassuring that some of you had heard about this already when you were asking about the prosumer earlier on. So yeah, as we've mentioned, we've got a whole new chapter, a whole new part, which is now in the BS 7671. And why do we need a new chapter? Well, this links in quite nicely with the presentation that you just heard from Nick from Signify. And they were talking about the reduction in carbon and the big push for mitigating it, the forthcoming climate crisis, etc., etc. And, ooh, wrong way. And to be honest, this does really give the reason as to why we do have this. So basically, the new Part 8 came into existence internationally as a document IC 60364-8-2, and this was way back in October 2018. And obviously it's taken now for this iteration of the wiring regs for this to actually come through. And essentially it gives an overview of how our buildings will operate electrically going forward, because there's going to be lots changing for our energy systems. And they started to introduce two new terms. So you've got the energy prosumer, and you've also got the prosumer's electrical installations. But why the change? Well, I don't need to really labour the point, but I will, because I'm quite keen on this. As you can see on the screen here, this is a temperature chart of the last 140 years of the world. And way back in the early 1920s, it doesn't look too bad, it looks a little bit chilly, to be honest. But quite rapidly, you see a distinct change in the temperature of the planet. And all this is caused by mankind, and it is quite uncontestable scientific fact, contrary to some of the tin pot brigades that you hear out there. Unfortunately, these things are, the rate of change is happening a lot quicker than scientists predicted, and worryingly so. And you may not think that it's going to affect you, but it will certainly affect your children and also your children's children. So even though it's quite easy to be blasé and think, oh, well, it's just getting a little bit warmer, what's the degree here and there, it will have a distinct effect on crop growth, global famines, and a whole multitude of different things. As I mentioned, these things are happening quicker and quicker, and there was a report from the IPCC a couple of weeks ago, 28th of February, so this was their latest IPCC, the 6th report, and this highlighted even more so that it was happening quicker than they thought it was happening 6 months ago, and it's only getting worse. And last week we had this pretty devastating report that was released as well. In the Antarctic last week, it was 40 degrees hotter than it should be, and in the Arctic, 30 degrees hotter. That's a massive temperature range. It may just be an anomaly, but I don't think it will be. And things like this obviously have a big effect. But you're wondering, what's this got to do with the wiring regulations? This is nothing to do with us. Well, to be honest, you guys are really well placed going forward, because you guys are a key to the solution, or a major key to part of the solution in solving some of this. What's happening at the moment? Well, we already know the government's got a legal commitment to reach the net zero carbon by 2050, and we're already on quite a pathway with that. There's been a massive push for the electrification of transport, so obviously you're seeing a lot more, a massively high rate of adoption of electric vehicles now. We do need the infrastructure to be put in to be able to support this, because now the demand's outstripping the supply. And so there's a lot of work, whether it's on domestic and commercial space, as you saw in the Regulation 722 earlier on, but also in the high, rapid, ultra charging as well on the networks as well. So that's already underway, the big push for electrification of transport. And now we really do need to focus on decarbonising the built environment. In the UK, we've got lots of old stock, old housing stock, and most of this, 75%, I think it's envisaged, will still be with us in 2050. And we need to bring those thermal demands, we need to bring those energy demands down as much as possible. We're already looking at, the intention is to have 600,000 heat pumps deployed onto new build properties, not new builds, retrofit properties by 2028. That's only 6 years away. That's a shitload of heat pumps to try and get in. Some of these have been put in for new builds already, and there is also extensive retrofit programs going on, but there's going to be a massive call for a co-joining of industries. It will be plumbing, it will be electricians working together, it will be people cross-skilling in order to get these things done as well. And that's only one part of the equation. But a big thing about all this is it's essential, especially with what's been happening with the energy crisis in Russia and Ukraine. And even before that was happening, we had a huge spike in energy prices. So we're looking to move away from coal and gas. We have very low coal input in the UK, but move away from heritage fossil fuels and create a low-carbon electricity network, which is fine. So you had new renewables, etc., etc. But what's the downside for sticking on some more solar, sticking on some wind farms, etc.? Well, it's increased amount of electrical demand as we're going for heat pumps and electrification of nearly everything, and also the variable output that you get from renewable energy systems. So how do you solve that issue? Well, you either put in more renewable generation than is going to be required to make up for fluctuations. You increase the amount of energy storage capabilities, or you maximise the energy efficiency and flexibility within that system. So, and that can relate to everything that's considered as part of the electricity system, whether it's commercial buildings, whether it's down to individual circuits, etc., etc. But in order to maximise how we get where we need to be in this very short period of time, it's focusing on these two aspects here. So it's increasing the storage capabilities that we have, and also maximising the energy efficiency and the flexibility. So by flexibility, it's making sure that energy can be made available more readily for different components of the system, and obviously energy efficiency is reducing the demand thermally and electrically. And all these things are highlighted in the report from Bayes under Ofgem, which came out last summer. And this is the transitioning to a net zero energy system, the Smart System and Flexibility Plan. And this highlights the intent and how a lot of this is going to happen. But back to that new term that was proposed, the prosumer. So what is a prosumer? Well, a conventional building is obviously generally just a consumptive load, taking in energy from the grid to power everything that's within it, whether it was the heating systems or the various appliances. And so the prosumer is a concept which starts to tie in lots of different technologies, including the original model of the consumer. And it aids in creating a building that's actually an active component within the grid. And this moves from this unidirectional model that you have here of energy just coming in over to that of the prosumer. So as well as taking energy in, as it was previously, it's also generating, whether it's solar, whether it's, I don't know, it could be quite a rural location. They might be lucky enough to have a wind turbine. You certainly wouldn't want that in a city. And also the ability to have energy storage, etc., built within this. So, as I mentioned, it's tying in lots of different technologies. So this could be solar PV, battery storage systems, heating, whether it's heat pumps or smart storage. You get sun amp thermal batteries, which can be used with gas or they can be used with electric. You've got electric vehicles in here as well, because obviously at the moment they're mainly just a load, taking energy from the grid to obviously power the transport. But through the concept of vehicle to grid or V2G technologies, that then frees up the capacity within this electric vehicle to then be able to supply back to the building or supply back to the grid. And this gives flexibility. So people will often say, oh, but then if I go out to my car, it's not going to have any charge. I don't like this idea. But it's all configurable. It's down to the end user, can set it to do whatever you want. If you know every morning you're going to be driving for 300 miles, you might want to not consider an electric car. But if you knew at 7 o'clock every morning you needed to get in your car and do, by the time this comes about, 300 miles will be fine. And you're doing 300 miles, so you need 100% of your car. You just configure that in your app. Or even smart AI is going to start coming into this, and it will know your predicted patterns. It will look at your diary and it will tie all these things in together. The AI thing is going to be quite critical. But just for comparison, a small electric vehicle, a tiny little Renault Zoe, has got 50 kilowatt hours of capacity within it. A Tesla Powerwall 2, which is quite a big domestic battery, that's got 14. So if you could use the 3 times amount of energy that's just sat there 90% of the time, you might not have to bother buying these extra batteries because you've got the capacity and the flexibility built within that. But obviously, if you do have a battery as well, and you had solar, then while you're out driving around doing your 300 miles, you're storing your energy to then put back into your car, and then you're not buying it back at however much a kilowatt hour is these days, between 16 and 36p, I think, depending on what crippling tariff you may be on. So that just gave a bit of an overview on how some of these things link together. But it's essential that it's done quite cleverly. And the buildings and the energy systems, they need to be smart and they need to be integrated. The integration is key. And so at the heart of this concept, oh look, I've got this pointer. At the heart of this concept, you've got electrical energy management system. And this could be in a device within the building, it could be operating in the cloud, so this is part of the smart AI, or it could be just quite a dumbed energy monitoring system. It can be as big or as small as people's wallets want to buy. And so within this, or to make this work, it's important that all the main loads are monitored. The system needs to know what energy is being used. So you're charging the car, that's a heavy load. What energy is coming in? So how much energy is being generated at that point in time? Because all these different factors then influence how much energy is needed from the grid. That information is really critical for the grid, so they know what needs to be balanced, what needs to be curtailed. And as we're sticking on 600,000 new heat pumps and, I don't know, 60 million electric vehicles, it's critical they know where every electron is and where it's going to be needed. So by having this flexibility is going to be critical. So you can see in this diagram you've got lots of things which have an additional meter, but for some of the lighter loads, it's just going through 1 metre. It's not every single thing will need to be monitored. It's just careful consideration, knowing the heavy usage. And in reality, you're not going to have lots of extra meters because the consumer units are getting bigger and bigger anyway, so you don't want lots and lots of meters everywhere. There may be some specific things that have additional meters, but in the main, you will start seeing these embedded within the devices. And this direction's further influenced by a new EV Smart Charge Point Regulation 2021, which comes out this summer. And from this point onwards, every EV charge point that's sold has to be smart enabled. It was already a consideration as part of OLED installations that they had to have an element of smart, but that was normally just time controls. These, the new iterations, I think it's down to per second metering. They need to have be able to operate at a signal by the DNO, so that the DNO can shift when they're coming on within 30 minutes and a randomised time. And all this can be overridden by the customer, but there still needs to be a bit of flexibility in there. And so this is just highlighting how these evolution of smart technologies is now featuring into legislation. And so this is definitely the direction things are going. So we'll just cover a few different examples of a prosumer's electrical installation. So this is probably how most people would envisage one, if you've ever sat and tried to envisage a prosumer. So it's a property, generally self-sufficient, so you've got solar PV, you've got your loads, you've got your little brain in there, your little electrical energy storage, energy monitoring, whatever. You heard what I said earlier on. Electrical energy monitoring system, there you go. And then you've got the battery storage as well. So this is just a self-contained prosumer operating on its own, and because of the dotted line here, it's not even taking anything in from the electricity grid. It's just operating quite happily. It's being disconnected. It's got the special earthing considerations that you'd need to take into account if you're going down this route. I'm not covering all that in this presentation because I'm going to talk long enough anyway. But if you did want to get further information, we have put together some leaflets, and we have got a separate presentation on this sort of thing. So that was one basic kind of setup for a prosumer.
Are we nearly done, Luke? It's nearly lunchtime.
Do these hurt eyes? Okay, before I was rudely interrupted by my colleagues. So that was a standard kind of setup. And then you have another kind of version of it called, in the chapter 8 that you're going to see. It doesn't draw the pictures as nicely as I do, though. You've got very boring, when you finally get to see a book, you have very boring line diagrams. But there's the second version is the shared asset, so that's 3 versions of that previous image, and they're either satisfying their own loads or they're feeding back to the grid energy or taking energy in, so it's quite nice. Got a lot of flexibility, or they could be supplying just back within this small network itself. So this is a term known as the shared assets version. And then the alternative version is collective assets. So all of the buildings, they don't have additional solar, they don't have additional storage or anything themselves, but they have a co-located set of on-site generation or on-site storage. And we see a lot of this going in now for small commercial developments and new residential developments, because it may be easier and cheaper to drop in a containerised battery solution close by to these buildings, as well as there may be a local farmers' fields, which they're happy to have solar on there, and then obviously it's lower installation cost and being able to be installed on bulk. But why would you see the need to do this? Well, a lot of designers have seen the benefit of having energy storage systems because that helps to lower the grid's connection charges. Because often it's only small peaks. Normally they have to size their connection to cater for just the small peaks in the loading on the system. So if you can add in an electrical energy storage system, you can mitigate that. You can bring down, you can peak shave. You can shave off those peaks, and so then that makes a lot lower cost they have to pay to the DNO for connection, and as well as satisfying all the flexibility and bits and pieces that go with this. I'm coming to the end, it's all right. So just to summarise what I've said here, that gave you a gist of why we've got that new chapter, the sort of stuff that's contained within that chapter. Some of it may look scary if you're scared of those things. But in the main, a lot of it is already with us. We've got lots of smart home technology. People have invited the devil in already through the little speakers and lots of plug-and-play stuff that's a little bit flaky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So the wired system is obviously much better to consider a whole wide approach when it comes to smart controls. And also, if your customers keep changing their router every 3 years, you don't want to get called back because they can't remember they need to do all the passwords for everything. So consider the hard wiring between all these things. I am drifting off track. And also, yeah, so I've mentioned that you've got all the smart stuff that's already coming in. You're getting more and more programmable appliances. People have had like the little timer thing on a washing machine and a tumble dryer for years, but these things are starting to become designed to work with the DNO, these remote signals that I mentioned coming in, and also within these other ecosystems that are starting to develop. And these things will just get smarter and smarter, they'll become more integrated, and as we move to the greater amount of electrification I mentioned earlier, our buildings will require closer integration as well as offering a great user experience. There's no point having all these things here if the customers aren't happy, they get confused, you're endlessly coming out, etc., etc. So the prosumer highlighted roughly what was going on, what's going on, the options that are there for bringing in our low-carbon energy system. As I mentioned, you guys are well placed because you're certainly going to be a key player in helping to solve a big problem of climate change by bringing the decarbonisation of the network. And to support this guy, I'm not a big fan of him myself, but he's cut VAT on all energy saving devices to 0 from the 1st of April. And this will be, it's time limited, so I thought this would be a 6-month window, a bit like the Green Homes Grant. 5 years, which is really good. It doesn't apply if you're just sticking on a battery storage system on someone's existing solar, which is quite unfortunate. So we had to help a member out with that the other day. But if you're putting in solar PV, heat pumps, battery storage as part of a PV system, and all the other low carbon technologies, energy efficiency measures, they're now 0 rated VAT. So that should really help. Okay, so a quick question. I think Darren's driving the question machine over there. So I will release Terry or Trevor the Tit. And so if you could answer this, we'll give you a little bit of time. So Terry, here he comes. Terry Trevor. No, I don't. I can hear lots of muttering. I hope that's muttering to your phones. Yeah, engaging. How are we looking? Darren?
We're looking at 80%.
What? Fantastic. So you all seem quite confident that this is the direction of travel? Well, that's good. That should keep me in a job for a few years then. As you can tell, I'm quite passionate into these things and I bore the tits off everyone. So thanks for being my audience. And yeah, any questions on this? Come and see us in the future. And just a quick one before I leave. You would have all seen that on his chair. I'm doing this Trek to Machu Picchu for the electrical industries charity. I'll come to you in a second, sir. If you would be so kind, or you feel the need to support this electrical industry charity, which is always there for the time of need, which you may not know when it happens, please feel free to donate. Sorry, question?
Yeah, as part of the previous company's low carbon issues, I tried an EV when it was about 6 years ago.
Okay.
And they asked me to do a big interview about the global company, about my experiences. I didn't like what I had to say.
Okay.
One is the technology is well ahead of infrastructure, and it still is.
Mm-hmm.
You plan your journey, but you're really praying that charging point works and it's got your actual plug. And then secondly, range anxiety is a big thing. solid-state motor, so you can't even tow it.
Yeah, yeah.
You've got to be lifted. And I wrote all that, and they didn't really want to put the interview out because the contracts are won and lost on low carbon at the moment. I don't see they can promote electric vehicles as much as they want, and I can say by 2030 Audi you want to be fully electric, but I don't see it working in the real world time because petrol station, they're everywhere and you can use them. You know there's a dozen pumps, none of them's going to work. What's your opinion on that in regards to, if I wanted to drive to a factory acceptance test in North Yorkshire about 3 weeks ago, and I was really pleased to have my combustion engine because I wouldn't have got there. And secondly, if I got to plan my journey, and you've got to look at all these petrol stations that have got EV charge. I know one's fitting a day, but I had a lead on my car, looked like a mobile phone that you lead that you buy out of the garage with the Apple device, and the other end's or a charging device, the other end's got a Samsung and Apple. It was literally a huge thing that they said to me would fit any charging point. Now, what I think is common sense is you've got Peugeot, Mercedes, Renault, everyone's making electric vehicles. Why don't you got my universal point, universal fitting? They've all got different fittings on their charging leads, which only adds to the risk of us not being able to recharge.
How long ago did you say this was?
About 2016, 2017. I could do it for 2 years.
Okay.
It wasn't a public government, they fitted a big charge on the side of the house and stuff like that. I don't see it being something that you could use without any fear.
Okay. I'll take this on now because obviously there's a lot to unwrap on that. Firstly, that was quite a few years ago, and the rate of adoption has been big. Exponential is the word I was looking for since then. Okay, so that's not that far ago, so it's quite a recent experience. Up until a couple of years ago, there were two main EV charge point types in this country. You had CHAdeMO and then CCS. CHAdeMO's been disbanded now. I think there's only one vehicle left, that maybe one of the Leaf models, and maybe the Outlander PHEV has a CHAdeMO. So everything now is going to CCS, which has got the Mode 3 Type 2 mode. Confused. So that it's got a common plug. So in the top part of it, that's all your AC, and the bottom part is the DC. So everything going forward is going to be using this one type of connector. So it leaves the people that have the older vehicles in a little bit of a sticky situation, but they're still going to be supported for a number of years. But most charge points going forward will all be the CCS type. There's going to be, by the end of next year, every motorway service station has to have 6 high-speed charge points. That's only 6. This is the issue we've got at the moment. In the last year, so many more electric vehicles have been sold than the charge points. Yeah. What I'll do, I'll yeah. Come and see me afterwards. We'll have a chat afterwards. I've got to wrap this up because I didn't realise everyone's been trying to get my attention over here for probably a couple of hours. So, yeah. Thank you very much. Speak to you later.
There was one guy there asking a question. There was one with a question.
Oh, sorry. There was one question down here I've just been told to answer. Hi.
Most of these renewables, they're not going to reach the average person, the average house. What has been done about it?
Well, we've just cut the VAT. Oh, we haven't. You've just taken, so that's 20% saving straight away.
Should be all right.
Oh, yeah.
Should be quick.
Yeah, and this is part of the huge retrofit programme, which has been talked about for ages. There's new standards being created at the moment. We've proposed that they incorporate the electrical side of things. It's a massive puzzle to solve. It's not going to be easy, but we don't have long. We have to get most of this work done within 10 years. But yeah, the price is a massive point, and that's going to really affect a lot of people. But yeah, we'll keep keeping that on.
Don't know about everybody else, but I'm finding it difficult to stay awake. Sorry, Luke. Thank you. Wow, that was intense. Oh, we have to stretch. Yep. Go ahead.
I'd just like to come back on some points there, because actually you pointed out a lot of things that government have had been spending the last year or so looking into each other and how they actually deal with the challenge. And a lot of the points that you made are within the document that was released yesterday in terms of the strategy. And a lot of them they recognise, but actually.
Sorry, I do apologise. A lot of them, it doesn't say how they're going to deal with those challenges. So I think we're on the right path. I think we're going in the right direction. But there's a lot of things to do to get it right.
Very ambitious with that 2040 target. It's not going to work. And you can get a car that will charge up in a couple of minutes tops, and you have 40 or 60 in charge. Because if you try to fill up at the start of the M1, and that put you 26 charges, they're all moving.
Yeah. And things will get quicker. Things will get better. But it's also the direction of change that's not going to go back. So we are going to live with it. Sorry, Shane, thank you.
No, thank you, Mike. Yeah, no, just to build on that, I mean, it's obviously part 8, it's more about just making you all aware of the fact that this is where they're going. That's the trajectory that they're on, okay? It's not going to get any less, all right? It's just going to keep increasing, okay? But you see, I'm from Yorkshire, so I said it in 30 seconds. You had to listen to Luke for like 3 hours. Appendices. Okay, so we're near the end of the book now. There's a lot of them, and that continues to be the case. Okay, there's a lot of minor changes in some of them. Okay, so as you can see, we've skipped straight over Appendix 1, 2, and 3. Why do you think that is? Because there's no changes in those. Okay, so we're into Appendix 4, which is what you would probably term the design appendix. Okay, it's got all of the design information in, cable, current carrying capacities, rating factors, all of that kind of stuff is in Appendix 4. Well, we've added a new note into that, okay, which talks about quad cleats. Okay, so this is the use of quad cleats, so that's now allowed under that table. It never was before. Okay. We're then on to Appendix 11, and I think it was Gary that covered it in terms of the fact that labels are no longer required on domestic installations, and it's replaced with a booklet of some sort or some description. Well, it gives you more information in Appendix 11. And to make it even more easy, we've produced an example version for you anyway. Okay, so that's available on our websites now. Appendix 13, so earlier on I covered the concept of a protected escape route and what your responsibilities are. There's more information in Appendix 13, but in essence it refers to other British standards such as quadruple 9 or treble 9-1, which the people working with those will understand what I mean there. Appendix 17, okay, so when Luke covered Part 8, he went straight into Chapter 82. Did everybody notice that? I hope some of you were thinking, well, what happened to Chapter 81? Where the heck's that gone? Well, Appendix 17 is Chapter 81, okay? So it still existed, it's still there. But to be honest, you know, you've had enough of Luke. It's so woolly and awful. Yeah, I don't even have to cover it, do I? Do we want more?
That's enough. That's
do
enough.
we want
That's
more?
enough.
Do we? Oh. Go on.
Right, you don't get away with that too easily. Sorry, I know I was on the stage a lot earlier, but I don't think you're really going to do this justice. Appendix 17, as Shahid mentioned, this was 60364-8-1, so the part 1 of the chapter 82, etc., etc. And this really does link in with what I described earlier. And there's a really key existing note in this, which states, on-site renewable energy sources and other local production sources do not of themselves increase the efficiency of an electrical installation, but they do reduce the overall public electricity network losses, as the consumption of the installation from the public supply is reduced. So this may be considered an indirect energy efficiency measure. So that links into that first point I mentioned earlier, where you had the three things, and increasing the energy efficiency is quite key. It also, because lots of the aspects of a building aren't listed within the wiring regulations themselves, so it does always refer back out to the relevant building standards, building regulations. So in the UK, obviously it's the building regulations part L for energy within England and Wales. And there's a new version of this that comes out, it's available at the moment, but it comes into force on the 15th of June this year. And this dictates a lot of the equipment and bits and pieces that need to be considered. It's the technical handbook in Scotland, and it's the technical booklet F for Northern Ireland. And all these things do set out the particulars for the energy efficiency requirements within dwellings and also non-dwellings as well. It's important to point out that this new iteration of Part L and the various other regulations that changed this year, they're only going to be in place for a short amount of time, because in 2025 there's meant to be the Future Building Standard, which is coming out. It's meant to be 2025, so I'd keep an eye out around 2027, but it's just to show you that this is a stepping stone for what's coming. And the Future Home Standard, Future Building Standard, at that point, all buildings are meant to be built as net zero energy. So they have to be as efficient as possible from that point onwards. When it comes to designing these energy efficiency components and systems for buildings, it's really important for the designer to take into account the selection of the energy efficiency devices. Look at the load priority. So I mentioned the different loads and how they can operate, how they can be metered, etc. earlier on, and the ability to shed some of these loads. And the intended use of the installation. Is it going to be a building that's likely to change within its use? So if you're over-prescriptive with some of the circuits and etc. that you're putting in, that it may not actually be that efficient in the long term. And also a provision for manual override to be there to override any of these load-shifting measures that may be put in. I've only got a couple of slides, so it's fine. Also within Appendix 17, it links back into this concept of the monitoring and the metering, ensuring that the control and energy management should be considered for new installations as well as modifications to existing buildings as well. And importantly, where these things are put in place, they should be subject to a periodic assessment. There's no point putting them in, and a lot of these things aren't just fit and forget. You need to make sure that that the whole systems are working correctly. May need a little bit of tweaking over time. Customers' usage patterns change. So it's really important that they're also subject to a periodic assessment. And that was it from me. Nice and short. Thank you very much. Back to
Thank you. Maybe we should have mentioned that. Luke's quite keen on that. Could you tell? Right, what are we on? Oh, it's getting on for 10 past. That's good timing. We're nearly at the end. You'll be sad to hear, obviously. Just going to finish up now. There are all the major changes that we thought were relevant to your business. There are a lot of other ones. So do please make sure after this event you get our free guides, you get all the information, you get a book, and you have a look and see what those are and how they impact you. So these are just a few things that we're doing for you and just to help you. We had this as a question earlier, actually. Do you need to get a new qualification? No. You need to understand the changes. All QSs need an 18th edition, but they don't need to redo it for Amendment 2. Hopefully you've enjoyed today and you've got some stuff out of it and you can access our free guides. That will help you towards your CPD and your understanding about Amendment 2. We mentioned about assessments earlier. the EAS, the Electrotechnical Assessment Specification, that's been changed over the last few years, and this is now increasing the need for your business to do certain things on the assessment. So it's up the game. You've probably started seeing it. I think when I asked earlier, there was a few faces nodding about people coming out and asking you different questions. It's a free thing. If you Google it, you can get a copy, or you can email us and we'll send you a copy. And it tells you what you should expect on your assessment. It's a nice little guide. In terms of the new technologies that we've looked at, the EVs, the prosumers, I think it was something like 70% of you were undertaking EV installations. It's a brilliant opportunity. This is our opportunity to do new, different work. If you're doing electrical installations, you can do electric vehicle installations. It's just another circuit. But this is for us to do, not anybody else. Prosumers installations offer a great future. All of this is wonderful stuff that you guys can do, and I know that there's some faces in this room I recognise have changed their business over the last couple of years with COVID to offer green tech as being the biggest source of their income. Great opportunities for you to be involved in. There is additional training, it's new technology, it's new standards, it's new requirements. Don't let that put you off. It's worthwhile doing it if you're pushing your business down that route. So it's a really good opportunity for you guys. As we said, this seminar will have helped to get your understanding for Amendment 2 up to speed. After these events are finished, we will put it on the ECA YouTube channel. We will put the slides up on the website and you will be able to get access to them again. If you are interested in having any other chats about other things, be it Amendment 2 or anything that we've talked about specifically today, so if you're looking at doing solar panels, for instance, have a word with your regional manager. We can offer you individual or bespoke presentations to your region. Remember, this is your trade association. We just work for you. So we're here to support you. I was having a really good chat with a couple of guys at break, saying about what do ECA do for me? What can I get? Loads. Ask us. Ask your regional manager. Get in touch with us. Ask. We can do all sorts for you. We've got benefits that you probably don't even know about. Use them. They're all there for you. And most of them, guess how much? Some of them aren't, but most of them are. We just put a couple of slides up about periodic inspections. We've talked about this a little bit as well as Amendment 2. It's not retrospective. So the standards, when they move on, they're not retrospective. It doesn't mean just because it's changed, what you did yesterday was wrong. Absolutely not. It's just moved things along. So most of the time, any differences between what you were doing yesterday and what you're doing tomorrow on a condition report would only be a C3. If there is any justified reason, you can always up it to a C2. But don't go failing installations just because they're old. It's not the right thing to do. And in terms of what we can do for you and support, Mike's got some information on that. Oh, Mike didn't get a clap.
You never do.
Hey!
That was just a sympathy vote, that wasn't it?
He's the boss, he gives us a pay rise. Oh, is the mic still on?
Yeah, I just wanted to cover some general things I said at the end. So we've gone through the technical part of the presentation. And so while I've got your attention, it's been mentioned a couple of times today, eComs. That's some software that we developed last year. It was developed in harmony with the changes to the EAS. Some of the changes that you will see in terms of audit or surveillance visits from CBs will be about your workforce, their qualifications, their CPD, and the training they get. And that will get more and more and more as we see some other developments on the back of the Building Safety Act. There is a new set of regulations, the Appointed Persons and Duty Holders Regulations 2021. That is a requirement of anybody procuring somebody to do work or design on a construction project to be competent. And the onus is more than just due skill and care. So watch out for that one. When the Building Act comes in, that will be a legal requirement, okay, to be competent. The hard bit now is for all of us to get together and agree what competent looks like. And that argument is going on now. So, on the back of that, we have got eComms. eComms is just a bit of software for those that don't have complicated HR and training products. It's simple to use. It just records the qualifications, the CPD, and training matrix for your guys on site. Okay? Have a look at it and use it. You might not need it straight away, but I think you'll need something like it in the future. Electrical OM, not an ECA product, but worth a mention because I don't know whether any of you have been up and seen Spencer upstairs, but we actually really like this product. And if you used Amtech, if you've used Fast Test, go and have a look at this. It's got some really good plugins, linking into Revit, etc. So please, if you've got 5 minutes, go and have a look because it really is a good product. ECA app, we developed the app last year. It's just a plea for me really, is start using it. We'd really like your feedback on, it's a basic product that is going to need development over a period of time. And you can help shape that and what it looks like and what it does for you. So please start using it, give us the feedback, and then we can make it do what you want it to do. Just some general contacts. We've said a number of times today, if you've got any ideas for us, if you want us to do a certain set of guides or some technical presentations or whatever, please just get in touch. And it's the same for Rob in terms of Rob Driscoll. He looks after our legal department and membership skills, Andrew. So we said it before, it's your association, so if you want to help shape it, please do. And again, guides and certificates, Gary's just mentioned this a number of times. There's lots of free stuff on there. We've updated the guides and certificates in terms of Amendment 2. They're on the website, so please go get them. Have a look. There's plenty of other useful technical information on the website. Okay, I can't have this many blokes in a room and not talk about health and well-being. So, we've had a torrid couple of years. People are back up and running. A lot of you are saying you're absolutely flat out. You've got materials, inflation, availability, labour resource. There's a hell of a lot of issues to deal with, as well as trying to make a living, make money. So please be aware of your physical and mental well-being. You can't get it back, can you? I wanted to mention a couple of things. There's a lot of gents of a certain age. This little badge here is prostate cancer. And if you are of a certain age, please get yourself checked. I know it's difficult to get a GP appointment, but we lose too many people to prostate cancer. I know I had a scare a couple of years ago, and it's very easy to miss, so please be aware of that. And talking about mental health, as I said, we've had a difficult period. People are struggling mentally, and if you or your employees you think are struggling, please don't keep it to yourselves. I've had to deal with a couple of employee suicides in my time. It's devastating for everybody involved. So if you need support, please ask for it. I would especially point you towards the Electrical Industries Charity. They do a lot in terms of mental health. And then that leads me onto Luke, who's doing that Inca Trail. I did the Kilimanjaro Walk for a Cause in 2017, and it was really worthwhile for me. And we actually, I think we raised about £85,000. So please think about yourselves and your employees.